Welcome to Classes of Mail. Before you listen, you should know that Alan Gigax is not in any sense an official spokesman for the Post Office, the NALC, or anybody else. His opinions are inherently his own and should probably be disregarded. Same for his guests. Any information you hear on this podcast could be wrong and should not be relied upon for any reason. Enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classes of Mail. My name is Alan Gigax, and we are going to pick up here with Article 8 of the Joint Contract Administration Manual. We are going to finish the rest of Article 8 today, so let's get right into it. Article 8.6, and by the way, I think this episode is going to be available by video. If it is, I will let you know where to find it in the podcast description. I bought a vlogging camera, and I should zoom in a little bit with that vlogging camera. Here we go. I'm zooming in. Well, I guess that's going to have to do. All right, that's fine. It's a work in progress. So let's just get to it. And, at a minimum, this will be an audio episode, and I'll try recording again some other time. Here we go. 8.6, Section 6, Sunday Premium Payment. Each employee whose regular work schedule includes a period of service, any part of which is within the period commencing at midnight Saturday and ending at midnight Sunday, shall be paid extra compensation at the rate of 25% of the employee's base hourly rate of compensation for each hour of work performed during that period of service. An employee's regularly scheduled reporting time shall not be changed on Saturday or Sunday solely to avoid the payment of Sunday premium payment. Sunday premium payment. A carrier who works on Sunday or any work period that falls partly on a Sunday receives Sunday premium pay, an extra 25% of the base hourly straight time rate. The no pyramiding provisions of Article 8.4.f apply to the Sunday premium. An eligible employee who is scheduled by management to work and does work on a non-overtime basis on a Sunday, even if the employee was scheduled on Sunday pursuant to a request for a temporary schedule change for personal convenience, is entitled to Sunday premium pay under Article 8.6 of the National Agreement. And there's a citation here. CCAs do not receive Sunday premium pay as defined in Article 8.6 of the National Agreement. 8.7. Section 7, Night Shift Differential. For time worked between the hours of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., career employees shall be paid an additional compensation at the applicable flat dollar amount at each pay grade and step in accordance with Appendix A attached hereto. The preceding paragraph, Article 8.7, shall apply to city carrier assistants. Night Shift Differential. The no pyramiding provisions of Article 8.4.f do not apply to the night shift differential because the night shift differential is not considered a premium under Article 8.4.f. CCAs do receive night shift differential pay as defined in Article 8.7 of the National Agreement. So there you go. That's an extra 25%, I think it says. Well, there's an appendix, and if you want to find the appendix, I'll let you know what page it's on when we get to it. 8.8.a, Section 8, Guarantees. Oh, guys, this is one, if you are a steward, this is where you refer to file that grievance to get the carrier paid their work hour guarantee. All right, Section 8, Guarantees. An employee called in outside the employee's regular work schedule shall be guaranteed a minimum of 4 consecutive hours of work or pay in lieu thereof where less than 4 hours of work is available. Such guaranteed minimum shall not apply to an employee called in who continues working into the employee's regular scheduled shift. Regular schedule employee call-in guarantees. Article 8.8.a applies to full-time regular, full-time flexible, and PTRs, part-time regulars. And there's a citation here. It's M575. Full-time and part-time regular employees called in outside of the employee's regular work schedule, but on a regularly scheduled workday, will be guaranteed 4 consecutive hours of work or pay in lieu of work. This guarantee does not apply when the employee continues to work into the employee's regular scheduled shift. So as an example here, if you normally start work at 8 a.m. and they want you to come in at 5 a.m., then when you come in at 5 a.m., you're guaranteed at least 4 hours. And so you're going to get paid from 5 to 9, no matter how much you work. But if you just pick up working at 8 and keep on working through your regular shift, then that guarantee doesn't apply because you've worked more than 4 hours. All right. So when an employee's, this guarantee, no, that's not it. Although full-time flexible employees do not have permanent regular schedules, they must be assigned weekly schedules by Wednesday of the prior week. Oh, dude, that's another really good citation there. And that's quoting from Article 7. This is considered their schedule for the purpose of administering the guarantee provisions of Article 8, Sections 8.A and B. When an employee completes a scheduled tour, clocks out, and then is notified to clock in and resume working, that is considered a callback. All bargaining unit employees are guaranteed 4 hours of work or pay if called back to work on a day when they have completed their assignments and clocked out. This guarantee is applicable to any office size. 8.8.B. B. When a full-time regular employee is called in on the employee's non-scheduled day, the employee will be guaranteed 8 hours of work or pay in lieu thereof. Pay guarantee for full-time employee on non-scheduled day. A full-time regular or full-time flexible employee called in on a non-scheduled day is guaranteed 8 hours of work or pay in lieu thereof. This guarantee also applies on a holiday or designated holiday. 8.8.C. The employer will guarantee all employees at least 4 hours work or pay on any day they are requested or scheduled to work in a post office or facility with 200 or more work years of employment per year. All employees at other post offices and facilities will be guaranteed 2 hours work or pay when requested or scheduled to work. So again, this goes back to like CCAs, your work hour guarantee, and full-time regulars. Or no, these are the absolute minimum. So this is like for CCAs. PTF employee calling guarantees. Article 8.8.C applies only to PTFs. I thought it also applied to CCAs. Well, let's read on. There's a citation here. We're going to learn more. A PTF requested or scheduled to work in a post office or facility with 200 or more work years of employment is guaranteed 4 hours of work or pay in lieu of work. If branch officers need to determine if their post office is 200 or more work years of employment, they should contact their national business agent. A PTF requested or scheduled to work in a post office or facility with fewer than 200 work years of employment is guaranteed 2 hours of work or pay in lieu of work. ELM Section 432.62 further provides that a PTF who is called back to work on a day the employee has completed an assignment and clocked out is guaranteed 4 hours of work or pay regardless of the size of the office. National Arbitrator Britain held in citation that the 2 or 4 hour guarantee provided for in Article 8.8.C does not apply to PTFs who are initially scheduled to work but called at home and directed not to report to work prior to leaving for work. So this is why you don't answer your phone when you're at home. Split shifts. When PTFs work I want to go back and just reiterate. If you are called at home and directed not to report to work prior to leaving for work. So if you're already on your way to work, you still have a grievance here to get that work hour guarantee. Okay, split shifts. When PTFs work split shifts or are called back, the following rules apply. And this is from M224. 1. When a PTF is notified prior to clocking out that he or she should return within 2 hours, this will be considered as a split shift and no new guarantee applies. 2. When a PTF prior to clocking out is told to return after 2 hours, the employee must receive the applicable guarantee of 2 or 4 hours work or pay for the first shift, and the employee must be given another minimum guarantee of 2 hours work or pay for the second shift. This guarantee is applicable to any size office. All PTFs who complete their assignment, clock out, and leave the premises, regardless of the intervals between shifts, are guaranteed 4 hours of pay if called back to work. This guarantee is applicable to any size office. 8.8.D. D. Any CCA employee who is scheduled to work. So here's the CCA one. Any CCA employee who is scheduled to work and who reports to work in a post office or facility with 200 or more work years of employment shall be guaranteed 4 hours of work or pay. CCAs at other post offices and facilities will be guaranteed 2 hours work or pay. CCA call-in guarantees. CCAs employed in post offices and facilities with 200 or more work years of employment have a 4-hour work guarantee, and CCAs employed in all other post offices have a 2-hour work guarantee. Split shifts, CCAs. The parties have agreed to the following rules for CCA work hour guarantees when there is a gap between two periods of work. 1. When a CCA is notified prior to clocking out that he or she should return within 2 hours, it is considered a split shift and no new work hour guarantee applies. 2. When a CCA is notified prior to clocking out that he or she is to return after 2 hours, the CCA must be given another work hour guarantee pursuant to, I don't know if you guys heard that. I heard something weird. Anyway, pursuant to Article 8.8, 2 or 4 hours, depending on the office size. Waiving guarantees. The Step 4 settlement, M879, provides that, quote, management may not solicit employees to work less than their call-in guarantee, nor may employees be scheduled to work if they are not available to work the entire guarantee. However, an employee may waive a guarantee in case of illness or personal emergency. This procedure is addressed in the ELM section 432.63. So CCAs out there and union stewards, if it's not an actual emergency, then that CCA should be getting that 4-hour guarantee. Management will say, oh, well, they volunteered to go home. Who cares? That's not what the issue is in Article 8.8. All right, on to 8.9. Section 9, wash-up time. Boy, all this stuff is empowering for carriers. This is why we read it. Installation heads shall grant reasonable wash-up time to those employees who perform dirty work or work with toxic materials. The amount of wash-up time granted each employee shall be adjusted or shall be subject to the grievance procedure. The preceding paragraph, Article 8.9, shall apply to city carrier assistant employees. And I would add that obviously it applies to all carriers because it's in our contract, right? This is not the clerk's contract or the maintenance worker contract. This is the city letter carrier contract. And if it applies to CCAs, of course, it's going to apply to full-time regulars also. Wash-up time. Article 8.9 establishes a general obligation enforceable through the grievance procedure for installation heads to grant reasonable wash-up time to those employees who perform dirty work or work with toxic materials. Wash-up time local implementation. Article 30.B.1 authorizes the local parties to negotiate additional or longer wash-up periods as part of a local memorandum of understanding, Article 30. Articles 8.9 and 30.B.1 prohibit negotiation of LMOU provisions that provide wash-up time to all employees without consideration of whether they perform any dirty work or are exposed to toxic materials. Local parties remain free to define the employees who satisfy these conditions. And there's a citation here. The rule does not negate the provisions of Article 30.C or the Article 30 memorandum, which address existing LMOU provisions. All right, now we get to the memos. Dude, how many memos are there? There are a lot. So I should probably just, start. Oh, stop doing that. Dude, it's zooming in without me telling it to, and I'm losing my place. Dude, bunch of jerks. All right, here we go. Here's a memo between the USPS and the NALC regarding Article 8. Recognizing that excessive use of overtime is inconsistent with the best interest of postal employees and the Postal Service. Dude, already. I mean, I'd love to cite this in a grievance. Excessive use of overtime is the status quo in some areas. And already this memo is saying this is a problem. All right, well, let's go on. It is the intent of the parties in adopting changes to Article 8 to limit overtime, to avoid excessive mandatory overtime, and to protect the interests of employees who do not wish to work overtime while recognizing that bona fide operational requirements do exist that necessitate the use of overtime from time to time. Dude, to me, if you're getting people consistently mandated and you're filing, maybe for an escalated remedy, this is something that you cite. this lays out clearly that this is not okay. It's not supposed to be okay with either party. So going on. The parties have agreed to certain additional restrictions on overtime work, while agreeing to continue the use of overtime desired list to protect the interests of those employees who do not want to work overtime and the interests of those who seek to work limited overtime. So again, this is, to me, citable in, to get your NOTs paid, to get your non-ODL people paid when they get mandated. The parties agree this memorandum does not give rise to any contractual commitment beyond the provisions of Article 8, but is intended to set forth the underlying principles which brought the parties to agreement. This is persuasive in my opinion. The new provisions of Article 8 contain different restrictions than the old language. However, the new language is not intended to change existing practices relating to use of employees not on the overtime desired list when there are insufficient employees on the list available to meet the overtime needs. For example, if there are 5 available employees on the overtime desired list and 5 not on it, and if 10 work hours are needed to get the mail out within the next hour, all 10 employees may be required to work overtime. But if there are 2 hours within which to get the mail out, then only 5 on the overtime desired list, then only the 5 on the overtime desired list may be required to work. The parties agree that Article 8, Section 5.G.1 does not permit the employer to require employees on the overtime desired list to work overtime on more than 4 of the employee's 5 scheduled days in a service week, over 8 hours on a non-scheduled day, or over 6 days in a service week. In the letter carrier craft, where management determines that overtime or auxiliary assistance is needed on an employee's route on one of the employee's regularly scheduled days and the employee is not on the overtime desired list, the employer will seek to utilize auxiliary assistance when available rather than requiring an employee to work mandatory overtime. This, again, it's just reinforcing all the stuff that's already in Article 8. In the event these principles are contravened, the appropriate correction shall not obligate the employer to any monetary obligation. What? What the? We agreed to this. In the event, I don't think this was in the last JCAM. Or maybe I just wasn't properly out. Fuck, maybe I should go back and listen to that episode to see if I was outraged about it last time, if it was in there. No, it's not new because there's a piece at the end here that's in bold, which indicates what's new. This is not new. What the fuck? In the event these principles are contravened, the appropriate correction shall not obligate the employer to any monetary obligation, but instead will be reflected in a correction to the opportunities available within the list. Dude, in order to achieve the objective of this memorandum, the implementation of these principles shall be to provide, during the 2-week period prior to the start of each calendar quarter, an opportunity for employees to place their name on one of the overtime desired lists defined in Article 8.5.a. The penalty overtime provisions of Article 8.4 are not intended to encourage or result in the use of any overtime in excess of the restrictions contained in Article 8.5.f. We agreed to this. Wow. All right, let's go to the next memo. This one, again, is between the Post Office and the NALC. This memorandum of understanding represents the parties' consensus on clarification of interpretation and issues pending national arbitration regarding the letter carrier overtime as set forth herein. In many places in the country, there has been continued misunderstanding of the provisions of Article 8 of the National Agreement, particularly as it relates to the proper assignment of overtime to letter carriers. It appears as if some representatives of both labor and management do not understand what types of overtime scheduling situations would constitute contract violations and which would not. Yeah, because they don't even bother to read the contract. But let's go on. This memorandum is designed to eliminate these misunderstandings. Oh, sweet. I'm sure that's totally going to work. 1. If a carrier is not on the overtime desired list or has not signed up for work assignment overtime, management must not assign overtime to that carrier without first fulfilling the obligation outlined in the letter carrier paragraph of the Article 8 memorandum. The Article 8 memorandum provides that, quote, where management determines that overtime or auxiliary assistance is needed on an employee's route where management determines that overtime or auxiliary assistance is needed on an employee's route on one of the employee's regularly scheduled days, and the employee is not on the overtime desired list, the employer will seek to utilize auxiliary assistance when available, rather than requiring the employee to work mandatory overtime. End quote. Such assistance includes utilizing someone from the ODL when someone on the ODL from the ODL is available. 2. The determination of whether management must use a carrier from the ODL to provide auxiliary assistance under the letter carrier paragraph must be made on the basis of the rule of reason. For example, it is reasonable to require a letter carrier on the ODL to travel for 5 minutes in order to provide 1 hour of auxiliary assistance. Therefore, in such a case, management must use the letter carrier on the ODL to provide auxiliary assistance. However, it would not be reasonable to require a letter carrier on the ODL to travel 20 minutes to provide 1 hour of auxiliary assistance. Accordingly, in that case, management is not required to use the letter carrier on the ODL to provide auxiliary assistance under the letter carrier paragraph. 3. It is agreed that the letter carrier paragraph does not require management to use a letter carrier on the ODL to provide auxiliary assistance if the letter carrier would be in a penalty overtime status. All right, and just for, again, clarification, we're talking about someone who's 8 hours only doing overtime on their own route. 4. It is further agreed that the agreement dated July 12, 1976, signed by Assistant Postmaster General James C. Gildia and NALC President James H. Rademacher, is not in effect. In cases where management violates the letter carrier paragraph by failing to utilize an available carrier on the ODL to provide auxiliary assistance, the letter carrier on the ODL will receive as a remedy compensation for the lost work opportunity at the overtime rate. 5. There is normally no monetary remedy for a carrier improperly required to work overtime on his own route. However, on a one-time non-precedential basis, the Postal Service will pay $7 for each hour of overtime work to each carrier who has a timely grievance pending at step 2 or 3 as of the date of this agreement. Oh, dude, that was back in 1988. Who cares? That's not still pending. But dude, again, to enter into agreement where we're saying there is normally no monetary remedy if you're inappropriately mandated for overtime on your own route. What are we doing, guys? All right, next, memo or a letter of intent, rather, between the post office and the NALC regarding work assignment overtime. A, the Postal Service will provide the opportunity on a quarterly basis for full-time letter carriers to indicate a desire for available overtime on their work assignment on their regularly scheduled days. All full-time letter carriers are eligible to indicate their desire for work assignment overtime, and by doing so are to work overtime as specified on their regularly scheduled days. T6 or utility carriers would be considered available for overtime on any of the routes in their string. Reserved letter carriers and unassigned regulars desiring work assignment overtime would be eligible for overtime on the assignment on which they are working on a given day. C. An annotation on the overtime desired list may be used to identify employees desiring work assignment overtime. D. The ODL provided for in Article 8, Section 5 would continue to function. E. Work assignment overtime will not be considered in the application of Article 8, Section 5.C.2.B. F. Once management determines that overtime is necessary for full-time carriers, if the carrier has signed up for work assignment overtime, the carrier is to work the overtime assigned by management. G. Full-time carriers signing up for work assignment overtime are to be considered available for up to 12 hours per day on regularly scheduled days. However, the parties recognize that it is normally in their best interests not to require employees to work beyond 10 hours per day, and managers should not require work assignment volunteers to work beyond 10 hours unless there is no equally prompt and efficient way in which to have the work performed. And in this case, as I understand it, equally prompt and efficient is at the same pay rate. So if you are going to work a work assignment carrier into penalty overtime, you should really give that penalty overtime to an overtime carrier. H. Penalty pay would be due for work in excess of 10 hours per day on 4 of 5 regularly scheduled days. Penalty pay would be due for overtime work on more than 4 of the employee's 5 scheduled days. Management could schedule employees from the ODL to avoid paying penalty pay to the carrier on his or her work assignment. Yeah. J. With respect to overtime work opportunities for employees on the 5th regularly scheduled day, the parties recognize a dispute exists concerning scheduling The parties recognize a dispute exists concerning scheduling obligations which would involve hours in excess of the limitations in Article 8, Section 5.f, i.e. the 5th day in this case. This issue is one of those we identified to be placed expeditiously before an arbitrator. Okay, this was back in 1985, so what's the resolution? Implementation of such a scheduling approach should occur July 1st, 1985. Okay, that was K. L. Grievances presently within the system, who cares? That was 40 years ago. Joint Statement on Overtime, June, this is M833. The Joint Statement on Overtime represents the parties' consensus on those commonly encountered situations where a uniform application of overtime procedure is required. This joint statement is restricted to those issues specifically set forth herein, but may from time to time be amended to add or refine additional overtime issues jointly identified by the parties. Signing overtime lists. Carriers may sign overtime desired lists only during the 2-week period prior to the start of each calendar quarter. An exception exists for letter carriers on military leave during the sign-up period. They are permitted to sign the OTDL upon return to work. I'd like to point out, these memos really are superfluous because this stuff is covered in the body of the JCAM. We've read this already, but I'm going to keep reading anyway because I get paid by the hour. Hardly. Unless local memoranda provide otherwise, when a carrier bids or is transferring between units during a calendar quarter, he or she may sign the OTDL in the gaining unit if he or she was on the OTDL in the losing unit. Full-time regular letter carriers, including those on limited or light duty, may sign up for one or both of the overtime desired lists as defined in Article 8.5.a or the work assignment overtime list. Whether or not an employee on limited or light duty is actually entitled to overtime depends upon his or her physical and or mental limitations. Okay, so this is an important caveat here. It talks about mental limitations, and a carrier asked me recently, I get contacted by people, reachoutofclassesemail@gmail.com, asking about getting a work restriction for mental health. And my take on it is, mental health is health just like anything else. If you've got, depression that gets worse when you're working overtime, if you can get a medical professional to write you a work restriction that takes that into account, great, then you have a work restriction. And this is to back that up, that it talks about physical and or mental limitations. A letter carrier may request that his or her name be removed from the overtime desired list or work assignment list at any time during the quarter. However, management does not have to immediately honor the request if the employee is needed for overtime on the day the request is made. Regular overtime list. A letter carrier who signs an overtime desired list is obligated to work overtime on that respective list when requested. However, Article 8, Section 5.e provides that employees on the OTDL may be excused working overtime in exceptional cases. And that is, just stopped recording. Okay, so the memory card that came with this camera, which I thought was a pretty big memory card, I guess it's not, just got full at 30 minutes. So the rest of this is going to be audio only. A letter carrier, you can be excused from working overtime in exceptional cases, such as if it's your birthday or an anniversary. That is listed elsewhere. Here it just says exceptional cases, but I remember those from elsewhere. Work assignment. Work assignment overtime was established by a Memorandum of Understanding dated May 28, 1985. Full-time carriers signing up for work assignment overtime are to be considered available for up to 12 hours per day on a regularly scheduled day. However, the parties recognize that it is normally in their best interests not to require employees to work beyond 10 hours per day, and management should not require work assignment volunteers to work beyond 10 hours unless there is no equally prompt and efficient way to have the work performed. Again, this sounds familiar. This is the third time at least that we've read this. Signing up for the work assignment overtime does not create any entitlement or obligation to work overtime on a non-scheduled day. T6 or utility carriers would be considered available for overtime on any of the routes on their string. Reserve letter carriers and unassigned regulars are considered available for overtime on what? We've read this twice now. Pop quiz. If you're an unassigned regular and you're working today on Route 17, on what route are you considered available for overtime? Route 17, whatever route you are assigned to that day. Management may use an employee from the applicable overtime desired list to work regular overtime to avoid paying penalty pay to a carrier who has signed for work assignment overtime. Further, management may assign any other carrier to perform the work at the straight time rate. Overtime distribution. The overtime desired lists control the distribution of overtime pay only among full-time letter carriers. Management may assign overtime to PTS or non-career letter carrier craft employees rather than to full-time letter carriers who have signed the work assignment list or an OTDL. Overtime desired lists are not used when scheduling for holiday coverage absent LMOU provisions. Overtime opportunities for carriers on a regular OTDL are not distributed by seniority or on a rotating basis, nor is a carrier on a regular OTDL ever entitled to any specific overtime, even if it occurs on his or her own route. Rather, Article 8, Section 5.C.2.B requires that overtime opportunities must be equitably distributed during the quarter amongst employees who have signed the same OTDL as defined in Article 8.5.A. Accordingly, whether or not overtime opportunities have been equitably distributed can only be determined on a quarterly basis. In determining equitability, there needs to be a comma here. In determining equitability, consideration must be given to total hours as well as the number of opportunities. I could sure use a memo that explains what opportunities are, but alas, there is not one. Mandatory overtime. The letter carrier paragraph of the 1984 Overtime Memorandum obligates management to seek to use auxiliary assistance when available, rather than requiring a regular letter carrier not on an overtime desired list to work overtime on his or her own assignment on a regular scheduled day. When full-time regular employees not on an overtime desired list are needed to work overtime on other than their own assignment or on a non-scheduled day, Article 8, Section 5.D requires that they be forced on a rotating basis beginning with the junior employee. In such circumstances, management may, but is not required to, seek volunteers from non-OTDL employees. The 2016 National Agreement altered this MOU and provides that all overtime work by a letter carrier, including carrier technicians, on the ODL counts toward equitability for the quarter. The only exception is for the first 8 hours of holiday premium overtime work performed on a holiday or designated holiday. As a result, the pre-arbitration settlement, M135, is also no longer applicable as written. However, overtime opportunities that occur during the same time as overtime work by a letter carrier on the employee's own route on one of the employee's regularly scheduled days is still not counted as an opportunity missed for the purposes of administration of the ODL. So this does give us a little bit of insight into what a missed opportunity is. You know, if there was overtime to be had on Route 55, but you're on Route 47, you may have missed that opportunity, except that you're doing overtime on your own route, on Route 47 or whatever I said. So it's something, you know. Anyway, let's see. What is next? We have the next memo is the Article 8 task force. Dude, another fucking task force. Oh, shit, but this is it. This is the end. Okay. The scheduling and administration of overtime is frequently a source of controversy and disputes between the parties. In an effort to address this issue, a national level task force, fuck your task force, will be established for the purpose of developing and evaluating improvements to the overtime process. This task force will consist of 4 members appointed by the NALC and 4 members appointed by the Postal Service. The task force is authorized to test alternate methods of administering overtime. The task force shall convene within 15 days of the effective date of this agreement and will function for the term of the 2023 national agreement. The task force will provide findings and recommendations to the NALC president and the vice president, labor relations, or their designees. If a test or any component of a test is deemed to be satisfactory, the parties will enter into agreements necessary to allow for implementation. Holy crap, that is the end of Article 8. Boy, howdy, that was a long one. So, when we come back, when we continue with reading the JCAM, we are going to read Article 9. I'm going to see if I can get this video camera stuff figured out. And in the meantime, thank you guys very much for listening, and I will catch you all next time.